The Republic of Paraguay is governed under the Constitution of 1992, which is the country's sixth since independence from Spain in 1811. Independence. The recorded history of Paraguay began in 1516 with the failed expedition of Juan Díaz de Solís to the Rio de la Plata estuary, which divides Argentina and Uruguay. After further voyages of conquest, Paraguay became another of Spain's South American colonies. Paraguay finally gained its independence from Spain in 1811. Constitutional Governmental Regulations of 1813. The Constitutional Governmental Regulations, approved by the Congress of Paraguay 2 years after its independence from Spain in October 1813. The Constitutional Governmental Regulations contained 17 articles, providing for a government headed by two consuls, José Gaspar Rodríguez de Francia and Fulgencio Yegros. The framers also provided for a legislature of 1,000 representatives, recognizing the importance of the military in the embattled country. The framers gave each consul the rank of brigadier general and divided the armed forces and arsenals equally between them. However, within 10 years of adoption the Constitutional Governmental Regulations, both Consul Yegros and the Paraguayan legislature had been eliminated and Francia ruled directly until his death in 1840. Constitution of 1844. In 1841, Francia's successor, Carlos Antonio López, asked the legislature to revise the constitutional governmental regulations. 3 years later, a new constitution granted López powers as broad as those Francia had used to govern. Congress could make and interpret the laws, but only the president could order that they be promulgated and enforced. The Constitution placed no restrictions on the powers of the president, beyond limiting his term of office to 10 years. The Constitution also included no guarantee of civil rights. There was no mention of the word liberty in the entire text. Despite this limitation, Congress subsequently named López dictator for life. He died in 1862 after 21 years of unchallenged rule. Constitution of 1870. At the end of the disastrous Paraguayan War, a Constituent Assembly adopted a new constitution in November 1870, which, with amendments, remained in force for 70 years. The constitution was based on principles of popular sovereignty, separation of powers, and a bicameral legislature consisting of a Senate and a Chamber of Representatives. Although its tenor was more democratic than the two previous constitutions, extensive power over the government and society in general remained in the hands of the president. Constitution of 1940. In February 18, 1940, President José Félix Estegribia responded to a political stalemate by dissolving Congress and declared himself absolute dictator. To dramatize his government's desire for change, he scrapped the 1870 Constitution and promulgated a new one on July 10, 1940. It was based on 1937 authoritarian Constitution of Brazil, which had established the Estado Novo regime. The new constitution reflected Estegribia's concern for stability and power and thus provided for an extremely powerful state and executive. The president now was chosen in direct elections for a term of 5 years, and allowed re-election for the second term. President could intervene in the economy, control the press, suppress private groups, suspend individual liberties, and take exceptional actions for the good of the state. He also had the power to declare a state of siege, which allowed him to suspend civil liberties in either the entire country or a portion of it for 90 days. The Senate was abolished and a unicameral Chamber of Representatives reduced in power. A new advisory council of state was created, modeled on the experience of corporatist Italy and Portugal, to represent group interests including business, farmers, bankers, the military, and the Roman Catholic Church. The military was entrusted with responsibility to safeguard the Constitution. August 4, 1940 referendum approved this constitution, Constitution of 1967. After taking power in 1954, President Alfredo Stroessner governed for the next 13 years under the Constitution of 1940. A Constituent Assembly elected in 1967 drafted a new constitution that went into force later that year. It maintained the overall authoritarian character of the 1940 document, including the broad powers vested in the president. Nevertheless, it reinstated the Senate and renamed the lower house the Chamber of Deputies. In addition, the Assembly allowed the president to be re-elected for another 2 terms beginning in 1968. The Constitution of 1967 contained a preamble, 11 chapters with 231 articles, and a final chapter of transitory provisions. The first chapter contains 11 fundamental statements defining a wide variety of topics, including the political system, the official languages, and the official religion of Roman Catholicism. The next 2 chapters dealt with territory, civil divisions, nationality, and citizenship. Chapter 4 contained a number of general provisions, such as statements prohibiting the use of dictatorial powers, requiring public officials to act in accordance with the Constitution, and entrusted national defense and public order to the armed forces and police, respectively. Chapter 5, with 79 articles, was by far the longest section of the Constitution, and deals in considerable detail with the rights of the population. This chapter purportedly guaranteed the population extensive liberty and freedom before the law without discrimination. In addition to the comprehensive individual rights spelled out in 33 articles, there are sections covering social, economic, labor, and political rights. For example, Article 111 stipulates that the suffrage is the right, duty, and public function of the voter. Its exercise will be obligatory within the limits to be established by law, and nobody could advocate or recommend electoral abstention. The formation of political parties was also guaranteed, although parties advocating the destruction of the Republican regime or the multi-party representative democratic system are not permitted. This chapter also specified 5 obligations of citizens, including obedience to the Constitution and laws, defense of the country, and employment in legal activities. Chapter 6 identified agrarian reform as one of the fundamental factors for the achievement of rural well-being. It also called for the adoption of equitable systems of land distribution and ownership. Colonization was protected as an official program involving not only citizens but also foreigners. Chapters 7 through 10 concerned the composition, selection, and functions of the legislature, executive, judiciary, and attorney general, respectively. Chapter 11 discussed provisions for amending or rewriting the Constitution. The final chapter contained transitory articles. The most important of these states that, for purposes of eligibility and re-eligibility of the president, only those terms that would be completed after the presidential term that expired on August 15, 1968 counted. The only constitutional amendment, that of March 25, 1977, modified this article to allow the president to succeed himself without limit. Constitution of 1992. The Social Democratic Constitution of 1992 replaced the highly authoritarian constitution in force since 1967. The Constitution of 1992 provides for a division of government powers among three branches. While the presidency remained the key institution, its powers were significantly reduced in response to the abuses of the past. The president is limited to a single 5-year term. The Constitution also instituted the first meaningful system of checks and balances the country had ever seen. For instance, Congress acquired the power to impeach and remove the president and state ministers. There had been no such provision in the 1967 Constitution.